Back. It's good to be back with you for this last lesson. We're talking about the resurrection. I'm kind of following the track of the children's classes, so some of these things you can possibly share with your children and find out what they also learned about the resurrection today. The resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'm in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 to begin with. That worksheet, it'll be pretty clear when we start getting into that part of it, what to do. Write down the appearance. I'll try to give you the reference for it, and you can look those up later. I'm not going to be going back and forth because we're looking at multiple accounts. So I'm going to cite the information in most cases. I'm not going to go back and read all those in the parallel accounts just in the interest of time, but I will cite those for you. So you've got this statement in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. It begins in verse 5. It says in verse 4, he was buried and he was raised on the third day according to the scriptures. And then here's what's important to us, that he appeared to Cephas, then to the 12, and after that he appeared to more than 500 brethren at one time, most of whom remain until now, but some have fallen asleep. Then he appeared to James, then to all the apostles, and last of all, as to one untimely born, he appeared to me also. Now, that's the only listing of the appearances of Jesus that's found in the Bible. It's the only one. None of the Gospels try to list the appearances. They just narrate some of the appearances, and they get some of them and they miss some of them. When I say miss, I do not mean they forgot about it or didn't know about it, but that wasn't important to their particular narrative. So what we have to do, if we want to get a chronological ordering of the resurrection appearances of Jesus up to his ascension, we have to take Matthew, we have to take Mark, have to take Luke, have to take John, have to take 1 Corinthians. And then we've got to find a way to dovetail those. And it's work. I will tell you, I worked on this for months to try to come up with what I think is a reasonable ordering of the resurrection appearances of Jesus. So I got a couple of notes to begin with, kind of caveats. First of all, I believe Jesus was crucified on Thursday, not Friday. Don't get upset about that and don't ask for an explanation. It is not critical to the resurrection appearances. But I think that's a more reasonable explanation of the events that happen than a Friday crucifixion. I believe he was crucified on Thursday. He was in the grave Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then Sunday morning, he came forth from the grave. But since we're concerning ourselves with the resurrection appearances, you don't have to get too concerned about that. But there may be a couple of things I say that might make you go, wait, that doesn't fit the Friday motif, and it won't. The second thing I want to tell you is that the only attempt to list the resurrection appearances in one place is 1 Corinthians 15. But it doesn't give us all the appearances. It is clearly not a complete list, so there are some missing. And as we examine these accounts, a couple of things become important to remember. Number one, all the gospel accounts are true and they're accurate. I'm not in any way, shape, or form suggesting, I'm not sure Matthew got that right, or no, I'm not positive about John's statement there. But that doesn't mean that they are comprehensive. And it doesn't mean that they're chronologically ordered. You can read some of the gospel accounts and it may look like this happened and then this happened, but that may not be the case. The writer may be giving us something that happened before, but because the writers in that era weren't really concerned about chronology much. It was more about just remembering. So if you were to remember an accident that happened and you were a witness to it, a car accident, you might say, the first car hit the second car, I mean, just rear-ended him, and I saw the hood fly up and the trunk fly up and the airbags go off. And there was a dog that was running across the street. Now, that dog may have been the cause of the accident, running across the street. You mentioned it after the fact, or I did, but it may be that the dog was critical to what happened prior to that. So don't get too concerned if it looks like, well, wait, this writer said this happened here, but this writer over here, it sounds like is saying it happened later. Those accounts dovetail and they work together, but you don't have to get too caught up in the chronology, because each writer had a different perspective and they had a different purpose, and their accounts serve their particular purposes. No gospel account is rigidly concerned about chronology. None. Not even Paul's in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. So stating something out of sequence doesn't prove it didn't happen. And it doesn't prove that the writers are contradicting each other. I'm convinced, absolutely, all these accounts are inspired and they are accurate. But we have to take what we read and say, okay, well, maybe that fits better here than it fits here. So we'll do that this morning together. Let's begin with the event itself, the resurrection itself. The tomb was opened and an earthquake occurred. You're not writing anything yet. No resurrection appearances yet. This is just Jesus coming out of the tomb. It happened on Sunday morning. Matthew chapter 28, first 4 verses tell us about this. And this earthquake on Sunday, the earthquake that occurs, it says in verse 2, a severe earthquake had occurred. You may have thought that the earthquake caused the stone to be rolled away, but that's not the case. If you read Matthew's account carefully, I think you'll see that an angel rolls the stone away, but there is an earthquake that accompanies that, almost as if the earth itself is giving a trumpet sound to what has just happened. Now, you might have gotten the impression that the earthquake caused the tomb to open, because in chapter 27, when Jesus was crucified, there's a statement made that an earthquake occurred at his death and many of the tombs were opened. And it sounds like they were opened as a result of that earthquake. But the people that are in those tombs don't come out until after Jesus' resurrection. So that's really interesting to me, fascinating that nobody went back and closed those tombs up. They just kind of left them where they were, and those people came out and walked around after the resurrection of Jesus. But the angel rolls the stone away, and then the earthquake occurs, kind of as a testimony that something magnificent has happened. The angel's removal triggered that seismic shock that accompanied it, which I think says nature itself is reacting to this glorious event. Nature itself is reacting. And that's not uncommon. Throughout the crucifixion and resurrection, you've got the sky darkening for 3 hours. That's nature's reaction. And then the earthquake that occurred when he died, and now another one that occurs on the morning of his resurrection. So Mark chapter 16, verses 1 through 4, there's a group of women that come to the tomb. Now, it appears that Mary Magdalene came separately. John, who mentions her coming, mentions Mary Magdalene as if she's coming alone. So, you've got a group of women, you've got Mary, and you've got the mother of James, mentioned in Mark 15, verse 40. Mary, mother of James, and Salome are two others, and Salome are the other two named. Mother of James and Salome, Mary. There could have been more women who were unnamed. We don't know how many women were in that group, but there's a cadre of women coming to the tomb. Mary Magdalene is coming from whatever direction she is, and they will meet there. I don't know that they met by design, hey, we'll meet you at the tomb on Sunday morning. It's possible, but it may have been they just felt compelled to go there, and when they get there, they meet. Now, don't write yet, no appearance. And what'd they see? The tomb's open. Stones rolled away. They see the tomb is open. At that moment, Mary Magdalene leaves. She runs back to Jerusalem. She is going back to tell Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved, the tomb is empty. That's all she knows. The tomb is opened. She doesn't know anything other than that. The tomb has been opened and the body's missing. Now, the other women stay there. Her message to them is the body of Jesus has been removed and we don't know where it is. John chapter 20, verse 2. Meanwhile, back at the tomb, the other women approach the opening and they look in and they find two angels. The angels instruct the women to go to the apostles and to tell them to go to Galilee where Jesus would meet with them. Now, that's really interesting that the first message is go to Galilee. Now, they're not going to do that for a while, but that's what the message is. I'm going to see you in Galilee. Now, that's about 60 miles away from where the apostles are. The apostles are in Jerusalem, cowering in an upper room. I'm not calling them cowards. I said they're cowering in an upper room because they're terrified. They've lost their Lord. They did not expect that to happen. They thought for sure he was invincible, even despite the fact that he told them he would be crucified. And so they are terrified in Jerusalem, locked in there. They didn't run pell-mell to Galilee. That's their home. Most of them are from up north. But they're in Jerusalem. And so the message is to the women, go tell the disciples and Peter. It's really interesting. Go tell the disciples and Peter that I go before them into Galilee. So those women leave. I mean, they take off. They see the angels, they're gone. Now, I don't mean they flee from the angels, but they've got the message, they're out of there. And it evidently they were afraid enough of what they knew that they don't talk about it. It says they were afraid and told no one. Now, that doesn't mean they didn't tell the apostles. They will tell them, but they tell nobody on the way. You'd think if they saw people along the way, they'd go, you won't believe what's happening back there. The tomb is open. The tomb where Jesus was, it's open. They don't do that. And maybe, I don't know what their reasoning is. Maybe their reasoning is, we're crazy. They'll think we're crazy. Nobody will believe us. Maybe we'll be punished by the authorities. They don't say anything to anybody. I find that so interesting that at the end of Jesus' life, the first people who know that he has been reborn, or at least could have guessed that, are so different in their reaction to the people who saw Jesus born. You remember who that group was? Shepherds. And it says when they left the stable, they were praising God and telling all the people. Isn't that interesting? They were proclaiming it. Something magnificent has happened in there. We heard these angels singing and king and all those things were being said, and they're talking about it. But here are the women who at the rebirth, Jesus being resurrected, reborn, say nothing to anybody. So they're on their way back. They did tell the apostles. The apostles are assembled together, and not just the apostles. I think we're missing something when it talks about the disciples. The disciples. They're rarely called the apostles. They're mostly called the disciples. But there are more to the discipleship than the 12. I'm going to talk about some of those others in a few moments. But they go back to tell this group, whatever this group is that's assembled in this upper room where the disciples are huddled, they're told, that group is told, the tomb's empty. Tomb's empty, and the angel said, he's risen. That's what the angel said. And of course, all the disciples start praising God, don't they? No, it says they weren't believed. They didn't believe him. And before you get too haughty about wanting to believe them, they should have believed, they were told, they should have known. I would say to you, if you went to a funeral and you saw a person in a casket, and then you left the room and went into another room, and then suddenly somebody came in and said, you won't believe it, they've sat up in the casket and they're talking, you would not go, praise God, that's wonderful. You'd say, call the authorities, they've lost their mind. You wouldn't believe it unless you did what? Saw it. And there's no opportunity for them to see it here. They haven't seen Jesus yet. No appearances yet. First blank is still empty on your sheets. Nobody's seen anything yet. They're only surmising. What might have happened. Mary Magdalene has probably the most plausible explanation. They've moved the body and we don't know where it is. But she has not come to the disciples. She has gone to Peter and the disciple whom Jesus loved. That's who she's gone to. They are together. They were together following Jesus when he was arrested. The disciple whom Jesus loved and Peter, and the disciple, that other disciple, as he's often referred to, just the other disciple, he's the one who got Peter into the courtyard because he was actually a friend of the high priest. And he got him in. And so they've been together, and now they're together. She finds them, and they're together, Peter and this other disciple. And of course, as soon as she tells them, out of breath, she's gone miles. It's a few miles from that tomb to back to where Peter is. She comes running in. The tomb's empty. They moved the body. We don't know where it is. You got to go. Well, they take off running. And they run to the tomb. And the disciple whom Jesus loved is faster. So he gets there, and what he does is he stoops down and he looks in the tomb. And he sees that the place where Jesus was laid is empty. There's no body there, but the cloths that he was buried in are there. It says, really interesting, they were in their folds. It doesn't mean they were folded. It would be like wrapping a body with cloth, and so it's got the outline of the body, and then somehow you reach in and you remove the body, and the cloths just drop where they are. So it still has the outline, but it's like an empty cocoon, which, again, I find just really interesting parallel. A cocoon, the butterfly has emerged. Life again. You might want to know that one of the early representations and symbols that the early church used was the butterfly, because it has such interesting parallels. Looks like it's dead, all wrapped up, closed up, and then yet here it comes, and it's more beautiful than it was before. So they see the cloths, and the head cloth is separate from that. It's there, and it's lying. So it looks like he's just dissipated out of the cloths, and they've left there. That's what the disciple whom Jesus loved saw. He peeked in. Peter, true to his DNA, just runs right past that. And he doesn't stop and look. He says, what are you doing? Go inside. He goes inside and he looks. And he sees the same thing. And then the other disciple goes in and he looks around. And it's interesting because he kind of calculates what happens. It says of him, and then he believed. That's what it says about the other disciple. Doesn't say that about Peter. Doesn't say that about him. But this other disciple goes in, he's looking, and he says, the only way I can make sense out of this is he's risen. They didn't steal the body. If they had stolen the body, the cloths wouldn't have been there. So he kind of plays a little Sherlock Holmes. He's gone. Peter doesn't make that conclusion, but the other disciple does. And then they go back home. They go back. They just leave. Well, and I've often thought, what? They just, okay, let's go back to what we were doing, And they leave and go back home. But what is there to do there? Peter's not sure what's happened. The other disciples, more confident of what has happened, but he doesn't know what to do with it. So they go back to their homes. John chapter 20, verses 3 through 10. Now you ready to write? Appearance number 1. Appearance number 1, Mary Magdalene. The first person Jesus appears to is a woman who in her former life had 7 demons, and she was female. It's a female who sees Jesus first. Sometimes we talk about the Bible is so anti-women. The very first person to lay eyes on the resurrected Lord is a woman. She returns to the tomb. Get this, remember, all right, where are the women? They're with the disciples. Mary Magdalene ran to Peter and the other disciple. They ran back to the tomb. She tried to keep up with them, but she's already run that race once. And so she's behind them. They run to the tomb. They see what they see. They leave. And when they leave, she comes up. She's breathing heavy. And it says she looked in the tomb and she sees the angels. There are 2 of them. And she has them speak to her. Why do you seek the living among the dead? You're in the wrong place. Now, that's so interesting because she'd say, well, I'm seeking the dead among the dead. That's where I am. I'm in a cemetery, but he's not here. He's risen. And then she encounters Jesus. She still doesn't understand. She doesn't understand. She just says, sir, to this other being, sir, if you'll tell me where they laid the body, I'll go to him. Just tell me where you moved him. She still thinks he's been moved. And then he calls her name. Man, I love this scene. Mary. And she hears his voice and recognizes the voice. She didn't recognize him at first. Why not? Well, we're going to see this over and over again. If this morning we were sitting in here and all of a sudden Brad Pitt walked in and sat down over here in the corner, a lot of you would look over there and you'd go, that's not him. That guy sure looks like him, but there's no way that's him. Brad Pitt wouldn't be here. See? But you don't know. I invited him. No, But we would tend to think, or even in an airport, you'd tend to think your first reaction will be, that can't be. That can't be. The President of the United States, Joe Biden, sitting in the back of a plane on Southwest Airlines? No, couldn't be him. Couldn't be him. He's out of place. So that's going to happen over and over again with the resurrection appearances. People seeing him but not seeing him. So she saw him, thought he was a gardener. She said, please tell me where you moved him. And he calls her name. And she turns back and looks at him again. And she calls him Rabboni, exalted teacher. And she evidently falls and grabs him. She holds on to his legs because he says to her, don't cling to me. The King James Version doesn't do justice to that phrase. It says, don't touch me. He's not going, no, don't touch me. He is saying, stop clinging to me. Don't cling to me because I've got to go to my Father and your Father. So the idea isn't, I'm too clean, don't touch me. Stay away from me. It's, don't cling to me. Don't hold on to me. I've got things I have to do, and I'm not going to be here long. I'm only here for a short time to be with you. But what an incredible scene. the first encounter with Jesus. And he sends her back to the apostles with her testimony. So, meanwhile, back in Jerusalem, the other women have left the disciples, and they are back on their way. This is appearance number 2. They're on their way home, and they are met by Jesus. Matthew 28, verse 9. Now, they haven't seen him. All they know is the empty grave. But he appears to them, to the women. So, I mean, you gotta try to get this. It's going to get confusing because you got people running both directions, moving in both directions. The women went to the disciples. They said, the tomb's empty. And the angel said, he's going to meet you in Galilee, whatever that means. And then the women leave because the apostles and the disciples go, no. That is not right. There's no way he's risen. It can't be. And maybe even questioning, why would he say Galilee? Why not here? They may have dissected that, parsed it, and thought, not an accurate message. So the women leave, probably throwing up their hands. And they're going on their way, and all of a sudden now Jesus appears to them. There he is. He appears to the women. And they, after he appears to them, he disappears. He's gone. These are flash appearances. They turn around and go back. Of course they do. Okay, you guys know so much and we were wrong. Now we've seen him. He is risen. We saw the risen Lord. Now, meanwhile, 2 of the disciples, who I'm going to suggest to you for reasons, 2 of the disciples who were there at the Last Supper, they're not the apostles. That group that was at that Last Supper was larger than the apostles, I believe. 2 of the disciples that were there among the group were on their way back home. They've been there since the crucifixion, but they're on their way home to a place called Emmaus. We know the name of one, it's Cleopas. We don't know the other. May have been male or female. Could have been a husband and wife. We don't know. 2 of the disciples are on the road back to Emmaus, and that's quite a journey. That's about 7 miles away. They're on their way home, and they're talking about what they saw. He's dead. I can't believe he's dead. I mean, he was our Lord. We thought he was the Son of God. He's dead. And then all of a sudden, this guy comes walking along beside him. Hey, what are you talking about? Well, we're talking about the crucifixion of our Lord Jesus, our dear friend, our master, our rabbi. Are you the only guy in this whole environment that does not know what happened just a couple of days ago? Don't you know that conversation was embarrassing to them after the fact? You know, it's like telling a parent about a child. I have this child in my class, the most wonderful child. I mean, he's so intelligent and he does such a good job and he's wonderful. And then the person says, I know, it's my kid. Oh, I'm embarrassed. I didn't need to tell you all that. These 2 on the road to Emmaus, they're just going on about what happened to Jesus, but they're sad about the whole thing. But they're prevented from knowing who he is. Now, the prevention could be, as I said, they're just not expecting to see him. Or it could be they're miraculously prevented from seeing him. That's certainly a possibility, that he kept them from seeing who he was. So as they're going along, they say, hey, our house is over here. And he starts to go on away from them. And they go, hey, why don't you come in and eat with us? I wonder if they had not extended that hospitality, if the event would have happened. You know the statement that's made in Hebrews, and some do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for some have entertained angels unawares. What if they had said, should we invite him in? We don't have enough food. There's not enough. The house is a wreck. I didn't do the dishes before we left 3 days ago. No, don't invite him. Okay, bye. Can you imagine? That whole scene would have been lost because he was going on past them, waiting. So they invite him in and they sit down at the table and he takes charge. Very unusual. He takes charge of the table, and he takes the bread on the table, and he breaks it. And it's him. Now, I told you, I think these guys or this couple were at the Last Supper. How else would they have connected Jesus with breaking bread? How would they have connected that? It's not like he went all over everywhere doing demonstrations. Here's how I break bread. But just a few days before, he broke bread with disciples. And they see him. And it says in the text how they recognized him in the breaking of the bread. The text says that. They see him, and he's gone. He's gone. Disappears. And they, oh my goodness, we should have known. I mean, while we were talking, did our hearts not burn within us? Didn't you feel something there? Why did we ignore that? And he's gone. That's appearance number 3. So they rush back to Jerusalem to tell the apostles. Another long trip. This one's longer than the others have been. And they gather with the apostles, and they are not believed. Mark chapter 16, verses 12 and 13 says they did not believe them. So these two people, Cleopas and the other, are saying, he was at our house. He was at our house. We saw him break bread. You remember how he broke bread with us not too long ago? I mean, it was just a couple of days ago at the Passover. He broke bread. We saw him. He did it the same way. It was exactly that. And it clicked, and there he was gone. He was gone. And they're going, mm-mm. And then comes one person that changes the whole tone. Peter. Somewhere in this time frame, because Peter's not with the disciples, remember? He and the other disciple went back to their homes. Somewhere along that way, Jesus appeared specifically to Peter. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 5. And when Peter comes back in the room, because in the story in Luke, they're talking about this event and they're not being believed. They report it to the others and they don't believe the two, Mark chapter 16, verses 12 and 13. But when you go to Luke's account of this same event, the Lord has really risen, verse 34 says, and has appeared to Simon. They began to relate their experiences on the road and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. So appearance number 4 was to Peter. So we've got Mary Magdalene first. The tomb's empty. We don't know where he is. And then coming back and saying, oh, he's risen. I saw him. I touched him. I clung to him. Still not convinced. Women have come. The tomb's empty. They're not believed. The women go away and they see Jesus and they go back. The two on the road to Emmaus come. These disciples are in negative mood. You ever been in that negative mode where everything's wrong? My family gets that way sometimes when I'm in the car and we're trying to find a place to eat. Oh, it's my wife, yeah. She leads the pack. But when it was one of these, okay, well, what about a hamburger? Okay, y'all want pizza? And it gets to the point where they're just in that mode, and this is what the head does. I could probably say, how about steak and lobster? And they're already in that mode. No. They're in the mode. These disciples are in the mode. We don't believe it, don't believe it, don't believe it. And then Peter comes in. The two on the road to Emmaus, they're talking, and Peter comes in, and they're all going, no, and Peter goes, you better listen to him, because guys, I just saw him. I just saw him. Okay, back off. Tell the story again. And the two on the road to Emmaus tell it again. And this is so great of God. While they're telling this, Peter's saying, I saw him. The two on the road to Emmaus say, I saw him. Maybe Mary's still there, Mary Magdalene. Maybe the women are still there. We've seen him, we've seen him, we've seen him. Jesus appears in the room. Appearance number 5. As they're discussing this, Jesus, there he is, right there among them. And I got to tell you, I wonder if those two on the road to Emmaus went, now, yeah, look at that. You doubters. There it is. We've been vindicated. And he appears in the room in their midst. Who's missing from the scene? One guy's missing. Thomas is missing. Thomas is missing. He's not there. John tells us when Jesus appeared there, Thomas wasn't there. Now, that's appearance number 5. You caught up? There are no appearances that occur during that week that follows. None that we know of. None. So, again, I got to tell you, it takes great faith on the part of these disciples to figure out, what is God doing? I mean, if Jesus is appearing, how come he doesn't come back? How come he doesn't talk with us longer? Let him tell us more. Where is he? How come he hasn't come into our midst again? From Sunday to Sunday, this is Sunday evening that he appears to all the disciples. And then they go a full week. Nobody sees anything. And I'm sure they're checking in with each other. Go knock on Mary Magdalene's door. Hey, you seen him again? No. The women, have y'all seen him again? No. Peter? I got nothing. Road to Emmaus people? Well, anybody want to go out there and check on him? I'm not going all the way to Emmaus. If they see him again, I'm sure they'll come back. Nobody has seen him for a week. 1 week later, it's Sunday. It's at evening, and he manifests himself to the 11. This time, Thomas is there. Now, they told Thomas during the week, he's come back. He's come back. We saw him. And what's interesting is, and I failed to mention this a moment ago, when Jesus appears to the disciples in the room that first night, Sunday night, all practical purposes, when he appears, what did they first think he is? Ooh, they think he's a ghost, a spirit. And he says, no. A spirit does not have flesh and blood as you see I have. See the wounds in my hands and feet. He shows them the scars, and I would say they're not even scars yet. I mean, he only died a few days ago. They're probably gaping holes. And if you wonder, well, why in the world, when he comes back to life, his body has to be miraculously restored. His heart quit beating. His lungs stopped moving. His blood is coagulated. All that changes. His heart is good again. His lungs are pumping again, air in and out. The blood is flowing. That's miraculous. So how come these and this are still there? Why isn't he totally cured of what happened? Because these are the signs that he's not just another man. Look, here it is. I'm showing you here. I know if you saw Mel Gibson's The Passion of the Christ, you saw Jesus get up and he walks past. It's a really cool scene because he moves his hand and there's sun coming in and you see light come right out through his palm. I mean, there's a punched hole through his hand. I'm not going into a lot of detail here. I can't, but you can't support the weight of a body here. If you drove a nail through here and you hung the body on it, it would strip out. I'm not trying to be gratuitously graphic here, but it will strip out, but it won't here. and this is considered part of the palm. That's the way the Jews considered it. So they're probably here rather than here. So he shows them, and that's why they believe it's him. And they tell that to Thomas. Look, Thomas didn't come up with this litmus test until I put my finger in the prints and put my hand in his side. I'll not believe. He's saying that because he requires the same proof they required. Stop making Thomas the big doubter. He's no more doubting than the others were, the 10. They didn't believe till they saw. And he says, I got to see it for myself. I have to. So he's in the room with them, and they're there. And now this is after the fact. Thomas isn't saying at the moment, I don't believe it, I don't believe it. He has already said that to him, and it's a week gone by. I'm sure Thomas is kicking himself. Why did I go to my son's soccer game instead of being there with the others? I could have seen it, but he missed it. And he's in the room, and Jesus appears. And I love this. Jesus says, Thomas, I heard you. I know what you said. I'm going to parrot it back to you. Here, put your fingers in the wounds. Put your hand in my side. He heard him. I love that. He's responding to him. He's not chastising him. He's not castigating him. He says, okay, you need that proof? Here it is. What I love is Thomas doesn't do it. He doesn't say, okay, you're right. You're right. He gives what is one of the most incredible testimonies of Jesus ever offered. We all talk about Peter saying, you're the Christ, the Son of the living God. Thomas says immediately, my Lord and my God. That is so powerful. What a scene. So this is now appearance number 5. And we're going to pick up the pace. I'm sorry, that's number 6. Appearance number 6. Appearance number 7, they leave and go to Galilee. Yeah, I know. I threw you all off, did you? No, that's appearance number 6. Appearance number 7 at Galilee, Jesus appears to Peter, Thomas, Nathanael, James and John, and 2 others. And it is because of the conversation Jesus had about this event with Peter where he says, you know, do you love me, do you love me, do you love me? And then he says about this other disciple, what about him? You know, you want me to follow you and I'll be chained and in prison. What about him? And so that all appears. Now that John says, chapter 21, verse 14, this is the 3rd time Jesus appeared to the disciples, the group. Now that's not the whole group. They're not all there, but there's a large number of them there. Oh, I wish we could go into detail about that scene. You know, they're on the boat. And I love, Jesus just kind of puts himself in there. So you're in the boat, and all of a sudden they see this being walking by on the shore. And he stops and calls out, hey, you guys caught anything? And they say no. And in the course of all that action and what happens, and them remembering Jesus has done this kind of thing before about fish, one of them says, it's the Lord. It's the Lord. It's our Lord on the beach. Peter, you know, not wait for the boat to get in. No, I can swim there faster. He jumps off the bow and he's swimming in. The other disciples are gathering up the nets, grumbling. Yeah, Peter leaves all the work for us to do. We got to get the nets up and get back in. And they meet Jesus on the shore, and he's bent over. He's got a brazier, and he's cooking fish. He's cooking for the disciples. And I think it's really interesting because when's the last time Peter sat around a brazier? It was in the high priest's courtyard. And what did he do then? I don't know him. I don't know him. I don't know him. And now he's back at a fire. Peter, do you love me? Do you love me? Do you love me? Don't you know that broke his heart? Don't you know by the third time Jesus said, do you love me? It all came back. I've been at this fire before. I turned away from him. And now I have a chance to redeem myself. It's a beautiful scene on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Appearance number 8, 1 Corinthians 15, verse 7. And then he appeared to James. I'm sure this is the James that wrote James, not to James the apostle, because that James isn't going to be around long, and this James needs that confirmation to become probably the disciple he becomes to Jesus. Appearance number 9, during the 40 days between the resurrection and the ascension, Jesus met with the apostles frequently, and I called it number 9, but it's probably multiple times. Acts chapter 1, verse 3. Put that next to number 9. Acts chapter 1, verse 3. He appeared and taught them about the kingdom. So he's coming back again and again. I'll see you tomorrow for the next lesson. I'll be back in 2 days. We'll talk more. He's appearing to the apostles to prepare them. Appearance number 10 is the one that really throws a monkey wrench in the gears. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 6 says he appeared to up to 500 disciples at one time. There is absolutely no recording of when or how that occurred. But I want to make a suggestion to you that might work. It does for me. A likely time and place would be Galilee. He had a lot of disciples there, and it may tie in to appearance number 11. Appearance number 11 was to the apostles on a mountain in Galilee. And that's where he issues the Great Commission. Matthew 28, Mark 16. That's not where he ascends. He does not ascend from a mountain in Galilee. He ascends from a mountain outside Jerusalem, Olivet. They're not the same. So it could be that Jesus has made known, I want to meet with my people on top of this mountain in Galilee, and 500 others get wind about it and show up. They're not there close by, but they're maybe far enough away that they see that it's him. They recognize who he is. I don't think he's walking among them showing his scars. It doesn't say anything about that, but 500 people could give testimony. I saw him. I saw him. And so 10 may tie in with 11. 11 is the appearance to the apostles on a mountain in Galilee, Matthew 28, 16 and following, Mark 16, verses 14 and following. And then the last appearance before his resurrection, before his ascension, is to the apostles and maybe the other disciples. It could be that they were there at Olivet. The apostles returned to Jerusalem for Pentecost, and Jesus met with them one last time on Mount Olivet, or the Mount of Olives, outside Jerusalem, just beyond the Kidron Valley, and it's there he ascends into heaven. Whew. That's a lot. I mean, that's a lot of information, I know, for you to assimilate, but it's a lot of back and forth. And I'll tell you, now he does appear to Paul, but that's post-ascension. He appears in the Spirit to Paul. Paul says, and to me as one untimely born. Jesus does appear to him. I'm not saying he doesn't have physical characteristics he may have had, but that's after he has ascended. But from the resurrection to the ascension, there are roughly 12 occurrences of appearances by Jesus. That one with the apostles could have happened many, many times, Acts 1, verse 3. But It's for them exclusively to know. I am floored every time I do this, and I am again today. I'm floored by the way God works. I tell you, if I had raised Jesus from the dead, I'd have marched him down Main Street, Jerusalem, saying, yeah, here I am. You thought you had me? You thought you crucified me? Look, I'm back. I would have done it that way, and he didn't. And the first appearances are to women, and they're less likely to be listened to by the males in that culture. And yet, they're the first ones he goes to. And the appearances just floor me because it's God's way, and his ways are not my ways. They're not ours. But what a great, great conclusion to the life of Jesus on earth. Thanks for being here today. It sure was good to be with you this week. God bless you.